and welcome to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures. A2RC here. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build and explain, upgrade and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start a new adventure with me. Today we have a pretty exciting Nitro engine review for you today. I find it pretty interesting and exciting. We have a Shuwa Toki built engine to show to you guys today, and this, in my opinion, is relatively rare. When I came across it a number of years ago, I had to have it, and I'm very happy and excited to share it with you. This is a brand new engine. Let's get it out of the sealed bag and start the adventure. This is the MX-18. Take out our desiccant bag here. Let's do a little walk around. Part of the reason why I absolutely love this engine is the color scheme. We have an all black block here, black pull start, and a perfectly HPI purple anodized head. Now, I don't know if they had this HPI purple in mind for a specific reason, but it definitely is a perfect match for that long time vintage original HPI color. And as I understand it, this is actually a French version or a French release of the Shuwa Toki built 18 style engines. In Japan, the 15Fe was released. This was released in Europe or in France specifically. And it's exciting to bring it to you today. It's an engine that I definitely had not seen in my early years. A few years ago, I was able to come across this and just had to have it. So like all of our engine overviews, we're going to take off this carb. We're going to go in through the pull start and the back plate, take off the head, show all the internals, and share its secrets with all of you. So something unique off the bat, the pinch bolt here actually uses a 5.5 millimeter. It's not the 6 millimeter standard size. It uses a 5.5 millimeter. And you can use whatever tool you want to, but this is actually an HPI branded cross tool for the wheel nuts, ball studs, etc. And this has a 5.5 millimeter style hex or socket, and it's an easy tool to use for this carb. Loosen it up, wiggle off the carb, and let's take a little look. So this MX-18 uses something that is special in my opinion, and that uses the SS style carburetors, and it's a slide version. This is a 2-needle carb. We have our high-speed needle here. We have our low-speed needle there on the slide barrel. Let's go ahead and reach down inside and see what size venturi this carburetor has to offer. So this is a 6 millimeter bore, which is a decent size for an 18. We can measure that neck down below. It should be, yep, it's a 10 millimeter bore. It uses a standard butyl style seal there at the bottom. And it's a great looking carb from Toki. Let's go ahead and take off this pull start and back plate. This particular one uses Phillips heads. It's always good practice to put something down inside in between your pull start and your one-way bearing. Make sure that that spring cartridge doesn't come flying out. Well, here's something that's curious. Behind that one-way bearing, we have a shim that goes around that starter shaft. And it does look like this pull start has a retainer, so that's something very curious and a great little addition for this Toki MX-18 pull start. Take a look at this one-way bearing. So this uses the larger style 14 millimeter one-way. And underneath that pull start, we have an additional set of Phillips backplate screws. go ahead and take out these bolts. Why don't we give them a little measure while I'm holding it in my hand. These look to be a M2.5, which they are. They're an M2.5. Black oxide Phillips head bolt. And they're an 8mm long bolt. Let's take off this back plate and starter shaft assembly. This is a pretty traditional Toki style starter shaft that has that little cutout. This does use that paper style gasket that's pretty traditional or typical of Toki, with a nice brass bushing or sleeved insert for the starter shaft. And this is a semi-interference engine. Notice that cutout there on top of the back plate to help clear that piston skirt. Let's look on down below here. Take a look at our internals. If you're familiar with these style engines from Toki, you notice that brass connecting rod down inside. Let's take off this prop nut and drive washer. Let's take off this great looking purple head and continue on with the adventure. So whenever possible, I like to exchange any of the bolts that are in the engine with stainless steel. That's to try to minimize that chemical reaction that can happen between the steel bolts and the aluminum. So this is an M2.5 bolt. I definitely would love to see M3 bolts, but that's what's inside of this particular engine. So let's take a little better look at this head. Beautiful HPI anodized purple. The compression bowl is built in with a shim down inside. 4-bolt pattern. And this is a bi-directional head. So that means that air can flow in one way and come out the other, but it cannot flow in between the other directions. But there's many fins here. This is a nice lightweight head for this 18 size engine. So let's get this piston sleeve and crankshaft out of the block and keep on going. So that sleeve pops out pretty darn easily, as it should. It's brand new. Let's get this piston and rod assembly out. Push out this crankshaft and take a look. This is a standard style crank. It has 2 flats on it. This is effectively the same style crank as the 15Fe. Balance lobe, there's nothing really different or special about it. It does have a beveled edge on the back side to help keep things slightly lightweight. It is not drilled or filled. Has a relatively standard induction window there. Let's go ahead and measure that back induction bore. This is a 7mm induction bore that at least allows for a decent amount of CFM and mixed airflow to get into the engine block. And speaking of the block, let's go ahead and do a little walkthrough around the block. I absolutely love this all black engine block. Toki only did all black for a few style engines. For example, the 12R from Toki was an all black block. And it has the updated and much needed pinch bolt here on the side instead of having the drilled holes and bolts holding in the carburetor. It's a more traditional pinch bolt. And moving on to the bearings, this is chrome steel bearings front and rear. And down inside the block, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's machining for the side transfer ports, and that's about all. Otherwise, it's a relatively smooth bore, and we'll talk about the reason why when we pick up the piston and the sleeve. Let's move over to the piston. I always find it interesting or funny to see this big of a piston in this FE style engine. Uses a brass connecting rod very similar to the 12E and the 15Fe. This is a floating connecting rod. Notice that there's that Delrin or plastic puck on the side of the wrist pin. Here is the boost port hole on the piston. This is what I consider the hidden boost port feature. If you want to learn more about the hidden boost port, feel free to check out the video on the 15Fe from Toki. But one very big upgrade or update on this piston compared to those other engines is the oil groove. I hope you can see it here, the oil groove on the top of the piston. This is a small but special and important update on this particular MX-18 that you do not find on the 12E and the 15Fe and other Shuwa Toki built RTR style engines. That helps to capture that oil film and provide a lot better lubrication and seal to that upper portion of the pinch of the sleeve. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes here, and let's take a look at this piston sleeve. This is an ABN style sleeve. So the entire sleeve inside and out is nickel coated. Let's go ahead and take a look at our exhaust port. A pretty traditional or standard rectangular style side exhaust port. A pretty big rectangular but vertically rectangular transfer port here on the side. Move over to the other side is the other mirrored transfer port for the engine. And then we have a relatively large boost port for this 18 size engine. There's no lower bevel, so there definitely could be an update that could be given to this sleeve. But otherwise, it's a nice and effective sleeve design for this 20-plus-year-old engine. In my eyes, this is a pretty special engine that probably not a lot of people have seen, especially newer folks in the hobby, whatever your age may be. If you enjoy these style engine overviews, where we get to take the engines apart, explore the internals, talk about the history, and have fun along the way, then feel free to check out some of the others that we've done in the past. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you like 10th scale, Nitro, and especially touring cars, then this is the place to be. And thanks for taking the adventure with me.